Hello, this is Eric of Not BIOS Tech and Reviews, and this is my review of the Fractal Design Torrent Nano ITX computer case. Now, I lost a lot of the original footage of unboxing and the parts included, but I do have some of it, so I'll be skipping through some of it back and forth. But the main point here is to see how the case is built, see the weaknesses, the strengths, so you'll know how this case works, where to mount your SSD, for example, how big a graphics card can be, how big your cooler can be, and of course, mounting fan options and radiator options. Now, one thing I want to talk about is the fan originally included with this case. I don't have anymore, I threw it away, but it was thicker than this fan, and the fan that comes with this case, being so thick, can block larger graphics cards from being installed. But it also has a bit of motor noise, so you can hear that little bit of a woo 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 sound even at low RPM. So if you want silence, you may want to change to a Noctua fan or something, or in my case I use Be Quiet because they are fairly quiet. And you may be triggered by certain things I do with the case or my power supply, for instance, but I have modified that since. So as I talk about things and show things that you may not like, I modified them since as well, because that's what I do. I'm an electrician by trade, so no worries about what kind of hazard I can pose to myself. I have to concern myself about you. Now let's get started. This is rather large for an ITX computer case, and it means we can also get more airflow. It has nice tinted glass, which, as long as it's clean, looks great with RGB lighting. And that's going to be added to this case. I'm still waiting on different parts. This power supply is an SFX power supply from CORSAIR. This is the SF750, which means it's 750 watts. This is platinum rated. And I can barely reach the graphics card. In fact, I had to flip the power supply around because it's so short. Because when I had this power supply the other way, I literally could not flit the GPU, because the GPU connection went from here, it's here now, from this side. But either way, since that power supply was opened up, we can see right here, here is the fan that was originally on that casing, and I have since changed this to a Noctua mod for my power supply fan. Now, one thing to note though, is if you ever change out the fan, what to do. You switch off the power, unplug your cable, press your power button to drain the power from the power supply, or else you'll get electrocuted, especially by the capacitors that hold power in the system. Now, 20 years ago plus, I did, before I became an electrician, you can see a bit of, let's see if you can see that, the scar right in my finger here. That is from going inside a power supply, this little bit of a scar on my finger. And yeah, got a big jolt, pulled it back, and cut myself pretty good. So be careful whenever working inside a power supply. If you don't know what you're doing, just don't do it. Here's the power supply and what's included. And one thing we do get with this is an ATX to an SFX bracket, which allowed me to mount this power supply in this particular case. An SSD storage device on the top. We can remove this tray right on top, just unscrewing this, and you can see that fits like so. There are little tabs on the top here, and I can just screw it in with this little thumb screw. It means it's toolless. That's a beautiful thing. The cables themselves, you can see, are really, really tight against the case itself. And on the back side, it's not going to be a pretty sight. I did a fairly decent job, I'd say, of hiding the cable mess, but it's tinted glass, so you don't see too much of that. So if I put the tinted glass back on, let's take a look at that. I can mentally hear in my head someone saying, oh no, the glass side panels are going to fall off during transport. It does include screws for this purpose. In fact, let's show that here. There are screw holes here, here, and yeah, so this does screw to the case, so these side panels won't simply fall off with one screw there and there. if I were to face it forward here, this right here can come off just like that, even when moving your computer. So there's a couple things we have to consider. For my particular build, I'm going to be replacing this front panel and removing it, which means I'll have to remove a couple screws. Now, when it comes to here, we have clips right here. So those clips are going to line up here. And there's a screw hole that lines up here and on the bottom to put across here. We can also see that there's markings on this. Let's see if I can block that so we can actually see those markings where it says 120 and 140. So we have two different fan options that I like. You might wonder why I'm changing out that big opening and didn't keep the original fan. The original fan was quite thick, much thicker than a regular fan here. It literally was a decent amount thicker, and it was even larger, take up this entire space pretty much for the fan. Though the reason I want to change it is because it had some motor noise. Even at the slowest speed, you could hear the motor of the fan. By changing that opening, I can now install, say if I wanted to, a 240 millimeter radiator, or even say a 280 millimeter radiator in the system, or as I actually am doing, installing two 140 millimeter fans. I've now removed 4 screws each side panel for these. And now, how hard or easy is this to attach? It's going to be a matter of laying it flat along here and sliding those tabs on the side, which this is really hard to do on camera, and you slide it into spot. Now I have a screw hole, 1 and 1 screw hole, so this is going to take 2 screws, not 4, and 4 in total that is, but 2 each side. So that means it's going to be left with 4 extra screws to put somewhere. Now, one thing I noticed, if I move this bracket right down here, I don't have to worry about this M.2 being occupied or not. I can do that later after the fact. And that is pretty nice for an ITX case that we want to install without worrying about each and every piece in the certain order. Perfect. Now, first we want to do is line up the screws and then assemble. It's already in spot just like this. This particular motherboard has the bracket, the I/O bracket already, I/O shield already installed. Our box right here contains all our hardware, including our screws that we need in order to attach our motherboard. Now to find out which one is to hold the motherboard, and this is going to require me to look at the manual. Between my motherboard and this case, the motherboard came with these M.2 mounting screws. The case does not come with these. That's important that you keep those. These are thumb screws, and it makes it simple for mounting and dismounting different parts, like for holding your GPU. Now we have the case screws here. This one right here, they can see, are the SSD friction screws. On this side, we have our fan mounting screws right there. Nice thick threads on here. Right here, we have 3.5 inch screws for mounting 3.5 inch drives, that is. Right here, we have tapered heads. And these tapered heads tell me that it's the mounting screws. This should be to the motherboard, to hold the hole down. Right here, we have these kind of extruded heads, and this is the power supply screws, these 4 right here. And here we have rounded screw heads, and these rounded screw heads would be right here, some more mounting screws. So we got those 2 different options. Now I always go with these. If I have 2 different choices, I always go with these mounting screws that have the flatter, wider head for holding down our motherboard. And let's not forget our tie wrap that we may need later on for tightening our cables. Generally, I don't put the screws down super tight as I do them, so I can leave a bit of room if I have to wiggle the motherboard around. Then I tighten them fully secure once I have all 4 in place. When it comes to mounting the motherboard, I just put them down snug You don't need to ream on them. It's not going to be great for the motherboard if you're like really trying them like really tight. But of course you want your motherboard secure so it's not wiggling around either. Now that I got all 4 mounting screws attached, time to get my M.2s installed because I don't want my graphics card and everything else to be in the way. Once I have my graphics card here, reaching here is going to be difficult. And once I got my cooler here, also reaching here is going to be difficult. And you might wonder why I'm doing it this way right around here, because I want to leave my port here for my USB 3.0 free in my particular situation. Maybe I want to put a little bit of curve so I'm not putting strain on the connector. And of course my graphics card is going to be here right against here. It's going to be fairly tight in terms of connecting everything. I could, if I want to, put this right here as well. So what location is best for you will depend on how many fans you're using. Since I first started this build, I've now upgraded the memory that I use to Torrent Z5 Neo RGB. This particular one is the cast latency 32 rather than the cast latency 30, but you'll notice the other timings are tighter. So that gives us a lot of the speed back. So we're 32, 38, 38, while the cast latency 31 is 40 and 40. So for the loss of cast latency, we gain in other timings. Here is our memory sticks, and these ones are AMD Expo certified, so we are safe to use this with the 7000 series without any problems. Now these particular sticks as well have nice RGB on top. We'll show that momentarily. And we'll also notice that the little key that inserts here is very close to center. It's just slightly off centered. So if I flip the memory, you'll see it's really, really close. There we are, apart, just that separation right there, the key in the middle. Now to get our memory installed and see how this goes. Let's go with the one corner. Line up with our open slot, make sure our tabs are pulled all the way back. It's probably the hardest part of putting the memory when you have a big CPU cooler right here. And we heard that snap, and now I can put the next one in. This should also fit the same way around with G.SKILL's facing the same way. Okay, let's get their memory into place properly in our slot. Here we go. And there's our snap. And we're going to have to get our graphics card now installed. I decided to outfit this system with the ASUS GeForce RTX 4070. We're going to be connecting this to DisplayPort. So let's get one of our display ports opened up and ready to go. Here's our D for DisplayPort, all ready to be installed. And here's our system build. We got fingerprinting on this. And now we have nice clean glass. And for such cleaning, I use these particular wipes. Here is the cable, not exactly the tidiest, but it is pretty much hidden by view because of the tinted glass. Before I get this powered on, let's turn off some lights. Here we go. So we can see more of the RGB that we do have, including the memory sticks once this is loaded up. And there we go. That's our RGB situation thus far. How do you take this off? You can't reach underneath to take it off. It's nice and secure. You reach this forward, just like so. We can see the fan I replaced it with is a Be Quiet for now. I'm going to put 2 fans to Be Quiet RGB, the light ones, which are really, really silent because I love silence. That's one thing you'll know about me if you see this channel much, is I'm all about the silence. Now this has mesh, so that means we need high airflow. In fact, I've been running this case for a couple weeks, but we can already see some dust build up. I'm not sure if you can see on camera or not. where the fan actually is. So the dust filter is working to keep the dust out of the case quite nicely. Whew. That really blew out the dust. Now, in terms of getting the dust filter out, there is a way to get it off. And I'm going to just quickly look at this. So we can see there's a little tab on top. I'm going to give that a pull. And that came out just like so. There's your dust filter. Now, if you didn't want it, let's go ahead, leave it out. But I prefer to keep the dust out of my case. It's going to restrict airflow, but at the cost of not having a dusty computer. Pretty simple to put back. So your main thing is lifting the tab up and out and just come right off. And just to get a closer look, we can see there's little barbs on there, and on the case itself there's those little gaps. So just lining it up, that's all you're doing. To reassemble this, we are going to seat the bottom first. I don't find this pretty as friendly as I'd like to assemble again, but once you get lined up on the bottom, we can just tap it in. On the bottom there is also a dust filter, which we can see right down here. And to remove this one, looks like we're gonna have to go inside the case to remove that dust filter. We're gonna literally pull it forward and it simply slides out, as we can see right here. Nice fine mesh, and that's gonna do a great job of keeping dust away, especially from the graphics card's fans, so we don't have to do a bunch of dusting all the time. On the back side, we can also install another fan for outtake. Let's get a closer look. So for our outtake fan, I can install, and that's what I plan to do after, a fan inside. We can see it lines up with little tabs that are in the back. We can see there's a little tab there, and tab there, and I can have an out port, out air, and that'll give me a lot more cooling. So looking for the top I/O, we have a reset button. We have a Type-C USB. We have two Type-A USB ports. And so the USB here, Type-A and the Type-C will all connect to the motherboard. You need the actual motherboard to have those as out ports, which my MSI MPG 650i Edge Wi-Fi does have, so I can take advantage of all those ports. We also have a mic in and a headphone out as well. Those are ones I don't plan to use at all, and I want to avoid the clutter of those altogether. So that's going to stay in my basement up here, my attic, I guess I'd call it the attic. And that's where I'm going to leave my mess. This particular case does have a lot of room for graphics cards, up to a maximum of 34 centimeters or 13.5 inches is going to be your total size, because we have an indentation here, so you're not going to get a graphics card any longer than that. When it comes to the depth outwards of the case, the graphics card, you can't have any longer than 15 centimeters or 6 inches at absolute most this way, or else you're going to be in the way of the plexiglass. Also, in terms of how many slots your graphics card can be, you're going to fit about a max of a 3-slot graphics card cooler. 3 slots is 3 back bracket slots on your case. Any bigger than that, you'll be hitting the basement floor of the computer case itself. And that means we have no room. Now, if you have a, say, 25mm fan, how long of a graphics card can you have in the way? Well, let you know, radiator will take up more room for your graphics card, so be mindful of using a radiator up here. Now, for a graphics card, absolute length with a fan, like my Be Quiets here, I'm going to be able to fit a maximum of 31 centimeters or just slightly over 12 inches. So about 12 1/4 inches long. Again, that's 31 centimeters length from touching the fan side to the back of the case before the bracket's sticking out. In terms of your cooler, I would not recommend an overhead cooler any bigger than the one I'm using now, which is the NHC14S from Noctua. As we can see right here, this is the one I've purchased and the one I'm using in my particular case. And I'm using the fan right now that came with this cooler as I switch from the light wings. We'll see that momentarily in this video. Now, it still gives me some room off the glass, but you don't want to choke the airflow. That's the main thing. I still have about an inch or about 2.5 centimeters off the plexiglass, but that allows air to pull from the sides here into the fan still. And this cooler, when it comes to an actual tower cooler, the actual maximum height you'll be able to get will be about 16 centimeters. You'll be touching the plexiglass at 16 centimeters or 160 millimeters, which happens to be 6 1/4 inch. Taking my filter out, we can see the grooves on the basement side for installing fans. So there's plenty of room down there. And in the front, you may choose to install a radiator, but with the mesh installed, the radiator's not gonna get much airflow. So if you wanna give yourself lots of airflow, you may wanna remove the mesh from the front of the case. But again, this keeps the dust out, and that's wonderful to have. You just need the airflow, high airflow fans, like lots of pressure. That's why they make this fan that comes with it very thick for high air pressure. That allows airflow to come through nicely. And like in the room, this is the ASUS RTX 4070 OC, the dual fan edition. On the bottom of this case, we do have some rubber feet. You can see they're well used as I've been using them, and they do grip very well. The one problem I did have is one of the feet did come off from me sliding on my desk forcefully. So be careful of that. Of course, links will be below to the items I use in this case. And of course, I'll be adding, once I get those RGB fans, links to those as well, to Newegg and Amazon. Nothing here has been provided. The rest of the RGB fans finally arrived. Let's check out how this case looks all around. CPU cooler has an RGB fan. Despite having an RGB controller and the RGB fans, I still managed to make this main window cleaned up. Now what I did is I ran the cables for computer fans here to the back side, ran it through the back here and then over the top, and then ran the cables from this hub on the side and into the top here attic, where I have a strewn of cables all over. I decided, at least for myself, to use the Noctua fan because it does have more airflow. So this, I find, has more airflow per amount of RPM versus these RGB fans. So that's what I'm using. However, the Noctua fan is a bit louder, but still quite reasonable. Either way, this is my build. I'm planning to modify this RTX 4070 eventually, possibly with the Noctua fans or Be Quiet fans. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to hear about the fan noise and see how low of RPM I can go while still having cool temperatures. Now, if you build your case and you add the RGB after the fact, you want to learn how to use this, because you'll have to fish your cables through. In my case, I went from the back side and pulled the cables to the back, and then I ran it through each loop there. This will be your best friend if you add the RGB after and if you want to make it hidden like I did. This particular case needs airflow. If you don't put fans in the front or on the bottom going up, you are going to face a large hot box because you're not going to have air really flowing with all this mesh here unless you have air being moved. So note that one. As long as you have your airflow, you should be good. It's nice that you can actually keep the dust out, but just know it's not going to have as much air movement as long as the filter's there. You can remove that, but at the cost of getting extra dust. Now this is a large computer case for an ITX, but if you don't mind, it does have pretty much all the fixins. It has the ports that connect to your motherboard options, and it is quite expandable. The cable management is not the best. Luckily it's hidden behind this tinted glass on the side, but RGB does show through it nicely if that's what you're looking for, something that looks fancy. You got it right here. And probably modding my graphics card with a Noctua or with Be Quiet fans. Still undecided, but we'll find out when all the fans come in and when I measure the sound of the fans to make a case that's basically completely silent. This is Eric of Not BIOS Tech and Reviews. Thanks for watching, and leave a comment below if you have any questions. Also, affiliate links to the products if you want to get them down below. Everything's paid for by me in this particular case. But of course, I normally don't buy RGB, but I got it because it looks cool, and that's what a lot of people like to see. Normally a case without RGB, especially on a showcase computer, looks really bleh. So I add more like yeah to it. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Not BIOS if you're not already subscribed. And if you are subscribed, thank you very much. You are awesome, and have yourselves a most wonderful day.